Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. Today I was going to talk about Vedic Astrology or Jyotish analysis for the new moon, also known as Amavasya in Sanskrit, coming up on February 9th, 2024. And it seemed like the overall kind of theme for this moment in time is balancing heaven and earth. Before I get too deep into the talk, though, I did want to thank everybody for hanging out, listening to videos, liking videos, sharing videos, leaving really nice comments. Yeah, so all the support that you give me and the channel and my work, it's all very much appreciated. So thanks so much. All right, let's go ahead. Note beforehand, the information presented here is for educational purposes only. It should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. If you're new to Vedic astrology, Jyotish, or my videos, all of my teaching videos on the subject are in my concepts playlist, so they can all be found there. And here's a list of videos that would be helpful to probably get more out of this video, because this video is an interpretation video, so I'm incorporating a lot of different concepts. And especially if you're a beginner, some of these other videos may be helpful to you to get more out of the talk. So, North, South, and East Indian style charts. That also includes a Western style. I just don't have that in the title. Um, Introduction to navigating a birth chart. Introduction to the constellations or rashis, constellation or rashi categories, planetary aspects, planetary exaltation and debilitation, natural benefic and malefic planets or grahas, karako, bhava, translated as planet breaking house. That's the whole kind of concept that we use. Also the nakshatras or lunar mansions, and a couple of yogas. I'll be talking about parivartana yoga or exchange of houses, and also saraswati yoga or the artist combination. I do have a whole playlist on each symbolism of each of the planets. So if there's a planet you're like, oh, I'd like to learn more about that, I've got a video on all the 9 classic Jyotish planets. And I have a growing list of videos on each of the houses and their symbolism. And so if you're new to the houses and you're trying to learn more about what they mean, I would start with the lugna, also known as the ascendant, rising sign, or first house. All right. Okay, so here's a chart for the new moon or Amavasya coming up on February 9th, 2024. So this moment in time for this chart is 17:59 in the evening Eastern Standard Time. That's the time zone that I live in. Um, the day lord at this time is Venus, and the hora lord or hour lord is Jupiter. It's already there between Venus and Jupiter. We're talking love, peace, romance. And Valentine's Day is coming up, so I thought, maybe because of Valentine's Day. The Shah period. So this is the thing, though, is that this Venus is a little bit fleeting here. Not just because it's the day lord, but you'll see in the Shah period. So the Shah period at the beginning of the day is Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, but then it switches to Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Sun on the same day. So again, that Venus moment is kind of fleeting, which, again, might be Valentine's Day. So, and then the what is it, secondary entourage. So we're switching from the Mars, Jupiter, Saturn to Mars, Jupiter, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Mercury on the 6th of March, 2024. So there's going to be about a month where we're in this Mars, Jupiter, Saturn period. And so, um, if we're just kind of, taking, integrating the energies of Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and then Venus or Sun, Mars and Sun are the 2 leadership planets. And Mars and Jupiter is like not organization, but enthusiasm. Mars and Saturn are like engineering, construction, organizing, that sort of thing, building. Um, yeah, so. And then a Mars, Jupiter, Mercury, that's all about kind of initiating healing communications, because Jupiter and Mercury are both education planets as well as communication planets. The Lugna nakshatra at this moment in time is Magha. So Magha is symbolized by a throne. And so, with that energy, we're talking like royalty and leadership, that sort of thing. High-minded leadership, typically, especially with, well, let's see, her sun. I have to check. Sun's in Dhanistha, so it's about kind of creating new rhythms, because Dhanistha, the lunar or the nakshatra over the sun is in Dhanistha, which is symbolized by a drum. So we're think drum beat, rhythm and that sort of thing. And the moon is in Dhanistha. So sun and moon are both in Dhanistha. So it's about finding new rhythm. And the moon represents the mind and emotions, and the sun represents soul and work. So it looks like this is a pretty strong kind of attempt at resetting rhythms with, health, vitality, work, the mind, purpose, even. Okay. Um, so let's start at the top. This is a North Indian style chart. So the lugna, also known as the ascendant rising sign first house, or is at the very top in that middle kind of diamond there. And then to figure out what the number of houses are, you can counterclockwise. The little number in the corner there, like the 5 in the lugna, that's the 5th constellation of the zodiac, which happens to be Leo or Simha. So this is a Leo or Simha rising chart. And so Leo is what we call a fixed fire sign. In Sanskrit, they would say Sthira Agni. Um, so if that terminology is new to you, again, you might want to see my video on the constellation categories. But essentially what that means is this is something it's fairly constant. When something's fixed, it's not wavering. It's just very, and sometimes even when you want to change it, it's hard to change. And Agni is fire, so fire is about like action, movement. Okay, so a lot of like constant fixed action movement. Um, the other thing I wanted to mention is that this lugna here, this Leo Simha lugna, is actually the same as the lugna for the winter solstice in December 2023. And I did a whole talk on that moment in time as a preview for the upcoming year of 2024. Again, for us astrologers, like the winter solstice is the kind of beginning of the year. Yeah. So, even though this is winter solstice in the talk or in the title, if you're looking for a video on energy for most of 2024, I would look at that video. But the reason why I'm bringing up here is because this almost seems like kind of a first chapter, kind of a reverberation for the energy from that winter solstice chart. So, in any case, so what do we have in the lugna here? We don't have any planets sitting in the lugna, but we do have 3 planets aspecting the lugna. So we have Mars, which is a leadership, innovation, energy, fire planet. So there's going to be a lot of fire, a lot of action, a lot of activity. And Mars is in Uttara Ashada. So Uttara Ashada is symbolized by an elephant's tusk. And so there's notion of kind of a sharp, piercing, powerful victory. Yeah, so really kind of forceful victory, I would say. And then we have Saturn, which is Swa. Swa means it's in its own house. So Saturn's super strong because it is in its own house. Saturn's a planet that represents things like delays, obstacles, chronic disease, anxiety, skepticism, depression, tradition, structure, things like that. And it's in Satabhisha nakshatra, which translates as 100 healers. So especially since Saturn's a malefic planet, natural malefic planet, Saturn Satabhisha is kind of doubles up on the more negative, um, probably symbolic meanings of Saturn. So, chronic disease that's difficult to heal. So there's some long-standing uh, situation here that's really putting a damper on the energy of the chart. And then we have Jupiter is also aspecting the lugna here. Jupiter's in Bharani. So Jupiter's kind of on the other side of the spectrum. If Saturn's the great malefic, natural malefic planet, Jupiter's the great benefic planet. And being in Bharani, Bharani is symbolized by a womb. So we have themes of like, kind of dramatic though, like birth and death and cycles of life. So especially with Jupiter being there, it's almost like this wanting to birth something. Yeah. Um, and with Mars and Jupiter together, that's a lot of enthusiasm, um, and excitement. But you have this like, massive Saturn and Satabhisha creating drag. So it looks like just from that already, I would think somebody's trying to do something new to counterbalance this drag that Saturn has on the whole chart. Okay, so again, putting this all together. So victorious, enthusiastic, new optimism or overcoming long-standing obstacles because Jupiter represents optimism. Um, the Lugnatia, or the ruling planet of the chart, is Sun, and that's in Dhanistha. The Sun has gone to the sixth house, which is an Artisthana. So an Artisthana is all about wealth. So it's about building wealth. It's about building things in the physical world as opposed to like the spiritual world and that sort of thing. And that's, again, that theme you'll see is going to run through the whole talk. And the sixth house also represents like daily activities, daily schedule, daily rhythms. And especially since we have sun and moon in the sixth house, it seems like there's this new initiative with Mars being there to create new rhythms in health because sun represents health and vitality. Also mindset because Mercury is the rational mind, moon is the emotional mind. So both mind planets are there. Work and purpose, that's sun. And the thing is that I circled this whole big thing in red, all these four planets, because these four planets together create what we call pravraja yoga. So we would very simply is a life focus combination. And the strongest planet in that mix, I would say, is Mars for sure, because Mars is exalted. So, and then you have Mars and Sun together, both fire planets. This is going to be, again, even more activity. So we have confluence from the Lugna into where the Lugnatia is gone, the ruling planet. And again, a lot of activity here. Probably too much. Because the other thing is that in the sixth house represents acute illness. And medically, the sixth house represents like the GI, like middle GI. So probably somebody is having issues with stomach, like and digestion, sort of thing. Looks like pain and inflammation. Because Sun also represents like the central nervous system. Mercury represents the peripheral nerves. So yeah, let's see. So this whole, again, Pravraja Yoga in the sixth house, we're looking at building a better physical life. And since the sun is here, the Lugnatia here, this is sort of like, it seems like again, if this was a person instead of a moment in time, I would be thinking that this person's natural inclination is to be a crisis manager, is what I'm saying here. Because also Mars is a planet that represents enemies, and it's in the sixth house, which represents enemies. So, and Mars being exalted in the Capricorn, these are going to be pretty strong enemies, or at least pretty strong acute illness or forces at work here that this person looks like they're trying to manage and kind of put into a better rhythm. Also in this chart overall, there's a sasha yoga. I don't have a video on that yet, but at some point, hopefully I will. That's at Saturn in its own house in Aquarius. So even though Saturn is a planet that represents things probably most people don't want, like delays and obstacles, when it's in its own house, it gives it power. And it's a Shasha Yoga is a Raj Yoga, which Raj means king or royalty. So power. It gives at least the seventh house power, although it does create drag on the Lugna here. And the seventh house represents things like independent business, partnership, whether personal partnership like spouse or spouse-like partner, or business partners. What else do we have here? We also have what I would consider a Balarishta yoga. So that's because 5 of the 9 planets here are in negative houses. So you have this conglomeration in the 6th house, and then you also have Rahu in the 8th house. So that's 5 out of 9 planets in what we would consider negative houses. So when you start to see a bunch of planets in the negative houses, and those negative houses we generally consider third house, sixth house, eighth house, and 12th house, it creates what we call a bala rishta yoga. Bala is a child, and rishta is like a um, deficiency or break, that sort of thing. So it's like when we see, for example, if this was like a newborn's chart, I would assume that this kid may have trouble in childhood. And sometimes it's so severe that some kids will not survive childhood if they have a really strong balarishta and they run the planets that are in the balarishta houses that form the balarishta. Yeah. So anyway, so there's some, this is a challenging moment. So we're already seeing that again doubling up this confluence from the lagna. Also to note, Jupiter is the yogi graha. The yogi graha is is one of the planets that represents wealth in somebody's chart. The sun is the Ava yogi, which means a planet that represents like dearth. And Saturn is a planet that is the duplicate yogi, which is another planet that represents wealth. So what's nice in a way is that Saturn and Jupiter, despite the tension that especially Saturn is creating tension and Jupiter is trying to ameliorate things, Saturn and Jupiter are both uh, positive planets of wealth aspecting the Lagna, although the Sun is the Ava yogi. So just from that, I would see that there's tension about money. I would start thinking that there's tension about money. Okay. The other thing to note about this chart is that the Chidragrahas are planets that kind of represent, how would I say, like um, they usually translate as piercing. So it's planets that represent kind of weak spots, or like Achilles heel. Maybe that's a better translation. Kind of like vulnerability points in somebody. So Mars is a double Chidra, and you can see from the Dasha period here, Mars is the Mahadasha, it's the main planetary period, which is going to last a while. And then we have Jupiter, which is the first Antar sub-period. That's also a Chidra. And then you have Sun, which is kind of a blip on the screen for this particular day when it changes from Venus to Sun. But you can see that like during this Mars-Jupiter Mahadasha and Antara, you have three, the main two planets, Mars and Jupiter, represent 3 out of 4 Chidragas. And so when we see that, we can see that there's going to be trouble. It's going to kind of hit people's weak spot. Yeah. Okay. So let's go through the other houses. So already, hopefully you're getting a picture here. So if we start, if we go from the Lagna to the second house lord is Mercury. That's in Shravana. Again, Mercury represents the, rational mind, decision making, speech, that sort of thing. It's in Shravana. Shravana is a nakshatra that's related to like storytelling and erudition and long-standing oral traditions. So speaking, writing, talking, that sort of thing. And then we have Ketu in the second house in Chitra. Ketu is a planet that's sort of like Mars, so it's initiative and kind of fiery and erratic, but even more so because it's the south node of the moon. So there's also this layer of like hiddenness or unexpectedness, or also kind of separation, sometimes even kind of explosive energy. So it's like an exaggerated Mars. You can kind of think about it that way. And it's in Chitra. Chitra is a nakshatra that's symbolized by a gemstone. So you have this kind of notion of like structure and architecture, the way the different facets of a gemstone, with a cut gemstone, right structure. Yeah. So, yeah, so what I was saying here is that it's like listening to unusual but good advice is what I was saying here. And let's see. And the advice I think is about like the restructuring the inner circle. That's what the second house represents. And also finances and also diet. So again, we're talking money here, but we're also talking acute illnesses. And I already mentioned the sixth house with these 4 planets are looking like there's inflammation in the GI. So the K2 can represent things like processed food and food that's not very fresh. You know, it can also represent, because K2 can represent things that are like foreign. It might be like ethnic food, sort of thing. And again, the second house lord has gone to the sixth house, so that's why I was thinking that um, there can be issues with the things that because there's not enough structure, potentially with diet or finances or even like the inner circle, like family typically, but family can be not just like biological or married family, in-laws, but also friends who are like family. So it doesn't look like there's great structure here in these areas, and that's part of what's causing a problem. One, at least some of the problems here in the chart. Again, if this was a person, yeah. Um, yeah. Then the third house, the third lord is Venus, and Venus is an Uttara Ashada. So again, another strong, victory. And Venus represents things like practical counseling, worldly counseling, like practical advice, and it's in the fifth house of it, advice and counsel. So that's what I think this person, again, if it was a person, that's what they're listening for. And that's what they're trying to get, kind of create new habits around things like diet, and also around, again, family, inner circle. And then on top of that, you have Jupiter aspecting into the fifth house, where Jupiter's the Lord. Again, Jupiter's in Bharani. So if Venus is the worldly lawyer, worldly counselor, Jupiter's the spiritual counselor. So we have the 2 counseling planets shining their light or in the house of counseling. So, and it would be really good advice, probably as good as it gets, because again, Jupiter is Swa in its own sign, and Venus is in Uttara Ashada. So, what else? So this third house, though, is more usually about uh, like written communication, stuff like that. And because Jupiter is aspecting into the third house, you might get something like writing. And since Jupiter's coming from the ninth house can represent like spiritual community, satsang. It could also be like a teacher, because Jupiter represents teachers. So maybe a spiritual teacher, something like that. So the third house is going to be pretty good, because the Lord is Venus. That's well placed, and then you have Jupiter there. So this could be like a new dialogue with supportive spiritual friends or teacher. So I think that's one of the amelioration points for the chart. And again, you'll see that come up again through the analysis. Then the fourth house here we have is the Lord is Mars, which again is in that Uttara Ashada, strong victory. And it's in the constellation here, Scorpio, so transformation. But you do have this massive Saturn aspecting there. So, and the fourth house represents things like home, family lineage, property, vehicles, education, happiness. So, Saturn is affecting all those things. So, again, because the Lord of the house is in again, under transformation here and victorious. So there's this like underlying kind of restructuring of the field that is the fourth house. So all these things. Also, mom is represented by fourth house, mothers. There's this new initiative to shift things to sort of balance or combat, these heavy effects from Saturn. Yeah. And again, this is like the winter solstice analysis that I did. it's a very similar kind of energy so far in terms of the main energy or thought of the winter solstice was because again it's the same configuration with this massive Saturn in the seventh house aspecting onto the lugna, and the lugna nakshatra, if I remember correctly, was Purva Falguni, if I remember correctly, which is represented by a hammock. So it's like swinging a hammock, relaxing. It's also about socializing, enjoying the finer things of life. So you had this like contrast, huge contrast between this massive Saturn in Satabhisha and the lugna. And so it just seemed like the theme for the year was how do you still enjoy life despite the challenges? That's kind of the theme, but also I think the lessons that many of us are learning this year. You know, find the bright spots. Yeah. So yeah. So the same in this chart. What else? Okay. So yeah, and then the fifth house, so I've already talked about it really. The ninth lord, Jupiter, Venus aspect Jupiter. I mean, this is going to be exceptionally good practical and spiritual advice. I mean, most people don't have this kind of combination. Um, and also this Venus that's like swimming in a sea of Jupiterian energy is aspecting the 11th house of income and socializing. So it seems like, oh, the other thing is the fifth house represents things like romance. So, I think this fits in, and since, the day lord and hora lord are Venus and Jupiter, it seems like this person is attempting to, or, kind of create some sort of lighter, maybe romantic, probably romantic, kind of moment or outing, maybe like a date night or something like that, to again bring some lightness, joy, fun to an otherwise fairly intense scene or situation. Okay. The other thing is the fifth house represents children, so children should be pretty good. And then the fifth house also represents the intellect. So again, it's like trying to create like a positive mindset despite, the obvious challenges here. The thing though is that since Venus is switching to Sun, in the day, same day here, we're switching from this romantic, time. The other thing is Venus, you can see it's pretty close to switching from Sagittarius to Capricorn. I think Venus is only in Sagittarius for like 2 or 3 more days after the new moon. So Venus is going to join this conglomeration here in the sixth house. So that's why I think, even though there's an attempt by the native here to maybe create something like just a nice moment, a nice dinner out or something like that, it might actually get canceled due to work because that's what the sun represents, or illness potentially. So the attempt may get thwarted. Um, and then the sixth house, I've talked about that a lot already, but sixth lord is, well, the other thing is the sixth lord here is a Saturn and Satabhisha. So this is like, some attempt, so this is in many ways, a very Saturn dominated chart because you have Saturn in its own sign, you have 4 planets in Capricorn, which are, Capricorns are ruled by Saturn, and they have Saturn aspecting Lugna and Jupiter. So you have, what is it, 6 out of 9 planets swimming in Jupiterian energy. That's going to be tough, yeah. So again, you have Mars here exalted, Sun there, so the 2 fire leadership planets, combust, Mercury. So the communication again and the, might be strained because again we have K2, which again is a separation planet, and then you have the second lord, Mercury combust, so that may be no communication or intermittent communication. Yeah. K2 and Chitra, like unusual intermittent structures. And then you have the moon and sun and Dhanistha. So I think overall, though, like there is, through perhaps this like beautiful advice that this person is getting, there's some success in reorganizing the daily schedule and thoughts, and also ameliorating If somebody's getting nutritional counseling, because the moon is there, moon represents nutrition and food, ameliorating the inflammation and pain that's looks like it's there in the GI. The other thing, again, this could just be arguments because the sixth house represents enemies. So even if they're like full hardcore, Disney villain type enemies, temporarily, this could be a lot of arguments. I mean, you have two fire planets, Mercury, speech, moon, mind, moon is the emotional mind, and Mercury. This could be a lot of flare ups and anger kind of spewing out. I think, especially regarding since, this is all about the sun here. Sun represents like boss, father, authority. Yeah. Yeah, so let's look at the other houses on the next slide. Okay. And then the other thing I don't think I mentioned, even though, so this is the same setup with the chart, and the information on the left is the same, but on the right are just my notes on the different houses, the other houses, 7 through 12. I don't think I mentioned also is that because of the Mars and the Sun, the two fire planets with Mercury at combust, second house, that may be some angry kind of outbursts. And because the Mercury's combust, it may be that somebody's trying not to talk right now because they know they would just be like spewing venom. That's kind of what I was getting there. So, because again, with all this fire, and again, K2 in general, like when you have K2 or Rahu in the second house, that's usually somebody who may not have the best filter on what they say. Um, there's always going to be like some kind of unexpected thing that comes out. They might also be more prone to like cursing and stuff like that. So anyway, yeah, so this person might be trying to specifically not talk, not because, maybe because they're arguing with somebody and they just don't want to talk to them, but I think also to make sure that they don't say something that's going to be really damaging with all this fire. So, then the seventh house, I already kind of talked about. Yeah, this massive swath, Saturn and Satabhisha. So partner indie business during long-term difficulties. The Saturn's going to be in Satabhisha the rest of the year. So the Saturn's not going anywhere. So it's kind of, so it's, at least for the next year. So it's kind of like, okay, do we just kind of give up and surrender? Like, not like surrender in a defeated way, like everything's hopeless and you can't do anything. But like this, again, if this was a person, they're trying to do something different, trying to bring some lightness, even if it's like squashed or canceled at the last minute or whatever. It doesn't, or it's only like an hour or two. No, even an hour or two. It's like brings, even though it's a fleeting moment, like some lightness and brightness and joy, hopefully. But yeah, but also this massive Saturn in the seventh house. This is a major reconstruction going on. And because Saturn is like the slowest planet and it takes about 29 years to go through the whole, horoscope or whole zodiac, the whole horoscope, this is a maturation process that's happening. And also with Saturn, this is like delays, obstacles, so skepticism, fear, anxiety, depression. So, this is a heavy duty energy for the partner to be dealing with. Luckily, though, at least Saturn's in its own sign. So Saturn's going to act as well as it can act in its own sign, but it's still Saturn. And the other thing is it's in Aquarius, which is a fixed air sign. So there's going to be a lot here about shifting long-term fixed ideas. And we'll see as we go through that that's, I think, one of the main issues here. Yeah, so, but the thing is, this massive Saturn is also aspecting on the Lugna, so it's affecting the native, yeah, and the relationship looks like. Then the eighth house, we have the Lord is Jupiter, and then Rahu, Revati is in Revati. Revati has energies related to traveling and hospitality. So again, I think there's this drive. Rahu's also a planet that represents like ambition. So again, there's some ambition here to do something different because the eighth house also represents deep psychology, to do something different, switch things up in the form of traveling or hospitality. So maybe it's like, just get away or get out of the rut or, go to some new restaurant or something like that. Or, maybe a long weekend, but I'm guessing the long weekend might get canceled based on this. But if you can make a whole weekend, from this, then, hey, good for you. Um, yeah, so again, the Rahu also brings like an alternative type of mindset. Like when you find Rahu or Ketu, or just generally a strong eighth house, that usually gives somebody like a more alternative type of mindset. They're looking for usually something outside of the conventional standards or dialogues, conversations, typically. And often, like if this person was running a Rahu period, which Rahu comes after Mars, they might really get into things like esoterica, things like Jyotish, astrology, Ayurveda, yoga. There are other sort of equivalents in other cultures. You know, um, Also research. The eighth house is research. So this person might be really into research. So it looks like this is somebody who gives, again, if this is somebody who gives good advice, and they look for alternative means, they like to research alternative means, but this is just a moment in time where just because of the way the planets are shifting, their advice might fall on deaf ears. um so let's see. So yeah, traveling, getting away, open-minded individual. I think I mentioned all that. Yeah, okay. So in the ninth house, we have Mars aspecting here. And Mars is going to aspect into its own sign of Aries, so that's going to be strength, so that's going to bring that Uttara Ashada energy as well, that powerful victory there. And Jupiter's there, so and then you have Saturn aspecting there as well. So you have not only Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter aspecting the Lugna, but you have this Mars, Saturn, Jupiter combination again, energy combination in the ninth house of father, authority, teacher, like guru, government, also satsang, spiritual community. And especially when you get Mars and Saturn together, because Mars is the initiator and Saturn's the endurance, you get people who are engineers, you get people who are manufacturers, you get people who are workaholics. And I think, workaholism is kind of prevalent in this chart. You get athletes. Yeah, all that. And then you have Jupiter there, which is a planet of expansion. So this is going to be a very powerful, if this is like a father or teacher or, a government, this is going to be a powerful um, and enduring leader or father or, boss, or potentially boss as well, who just won't quit. And that may be part of the problem because, like, if there's a new boss here, which this could be, some of the fights, because again, Sun is in the authority figure, Sun and Mars are in this big loop in the sixth house. That might be part of the problem, is just adjusting to this, like, new person who's just like won't quit. And if they never take a break and they expect you to do the same, well, that's a lot to keep up with based on this energy combination in the ninth house. So again, the ninth house: industrious, engineer, athlete, workaholic, enthusiastic, hyperactive. Could definitely be hyperactive, going full throttle at work, pushes through challenges. Um, uh, and there may be headbutting here versus collaborating. Like, can we manage to get, instead of butt heads here, can we collaborate? And again, adjusting to this new authority figure. It could also be new legal initiatives by the government. So again, if we're taking this to a higher level rather than a personal level, it could be that as well. The 10th house lord is Venus. So that's the thing, is work for this native, if it is a person, is pretty smooth sailing, because that Venus swimming in Jupiterian energy. So it's not so much an issue with work. I think it might be somebody more than like, maybe somebody at work, but not work itself. And then the 11th house ward is that combos Mars or Mercury. It's aspected by Venus, so there can be some advice here about, new initiatives to improve income, social circle, that sort of thing. Although, again, income and social circle, it's a combust Mercury mixed up in this, pravraja yoga in the sixth house. So that may be part of the issue here. Yeah, creating something new, interacting with new people, that sort of thing. And then the 12th house lord is this new moon. The moon is aspecting its own house, so at least that'll help a bit with any kind of losses because the 12th house represents things like losses. But then you also have Mars there in the 12th house, and Mars is debilitated in Cancer. Then you have the combust Mercury, and then you have the Sun. So, the 12th house not only represents losses, but it can represent um, hidden enemies. So again, you've got all these planets in the sixth house of enemies and then also the 12th house of hidden enemies. So again, looks like there's some arguments going on here. The other thing is the 12th house represents sleep. So there may be GI issues as well as sleep. So what I'm seeing here with this massive Saturn aspecting on the Lugna, this person's pretty stressed out and usually looks like it's manifesting for them in terms of GI upset or indigestion and sleep issues like insomnia. Um, and that may be what they're trying to do through this good advice that they're getting, is just creating more harmonious structure rhythm with both food and sleep. So, did I get everything? Yeah, I think that's most of it. So, yeah. So anyway, that's the chart. So you kind of get, I think, an overall picture here. Now let's look at the amshas, also known as the subzodiacs or the divisional charts to get a little more detail and also some information about timing here. So the first couple subzodiacs here, amshas, this is about relationships. And I have the Navamsha D9, which is about the spouse, and it's also kind of a general chart for the natal chart. And then I have below it the Dwadashamsha D12, so this is about parents. Because the reason why I included the D12 is because that massive Saturn is aspecting onto the ninth house of father and also the fourth house of mother. So I was like, well, parents might be having some problems. So let's see. The Navamsha first at the top. So what I've done, just to remind you, the dasha sequence. So we're in Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Venus / Sun on the day of the new moon, and then we're switching to Mars, Jupiter, Mercury on 6th of March, so about a month. And then I circled those planets. So again, these amshas are mostly used for timing. So you can kind of see um, where the planets are, and then switching Mars and Jupiter will be the same, but then Saturn, Venus, Sun will switch to Mercury. Anyway, so then what we look at first, is are these planets in positive or negative houses? As a first sort of assessment, first level assessment. So the Navamsha here, you can see that Venus is in a negative house as well as Mercury. So again, Venus is only kind of half a day, but it's in the ninth house here, or in the eighth house here. It's in Sagittarius again and aspected by Jupiter. So again, the spouse, and again, this is the subject for the spouse. So the spouse has good intentions, and the spouse is, deep down, looks like a lovey-dovey person. But you can see with Mercury, Mercury's in the 12th house of loss, and that's the decision making and a rational mind. You can see that uh, there's some decision making and thoughts and stuff like that are bothersome and creating loss, frankly, for the again partner, spouse, person. The other thing is that this Mercury does have a Jupiter aspecting on it, but it also has a massive Mars, which again here is exalted, and a swa Saturn. So you have Jupiter on it, but then you have this Mars and Saturn, which are going to be more problematic despite the attempt to uplift through Jupiter. because Saturn's going to be debilitated in Aries where Mercury is, and Mars is going to be exalted. So you're going to have exaggerated Saturn and Mars. So it's going to overshadow the Jupiterian, attempt to lift up here. So yeah. So again, when you have Saturn and Mars like that on the Mercury in the 12th house, I mean, this is somebody who's worried about losses, despite there being protection, because again, Mars aspecting in its own house in Aries, that means that there's going to be some protection, at least on material losses. But it looks like there's still a lot of worry and anxiety, is what I'm seeing here. Mood issues and stuff, sleep. Somebody's going to be losing sleep. Um, um, so yeah, so again, see, so it seems like again that this well-intentioned attempt by the native to create a light moment is going to be canceled. It's not going to fly with Venus and the ninth or eighth house here. Yeah. And the other thing is that this massive Saturn Mars combination in the ninth house, again, we're talking about like a boss or authority that won't quit, or a sense of duty, because the ninth house is also a Dharmasthana, a house of duty. So it looks like the spouse or spouse-like partner or business partner is worried about duties and obligations and very kind of worldly things, because even Saturn and Mars are the Bhumi Karakas. So Bhumi means like earth, property, and Karaka means symbol. So these are the two planets that symbolize property. And again, it's like nuts and bolts type stuff. Yeah. So very physical type issues, material issues are creating stress for the spouse. So that fits with the, natal chart. Then the Dwadashamsha, the D12 parents. Well, Jupiter's not well placed, but all the other planets are. But Jupiter is a Uttara sub period that's going to last for a while. And look, so Jupiter's in the 12th house. So Jupiter represents things like children. So this could be the native for the parents here. And again, you have Saturn aspecting into the 12th house, and you have Mars aspecting here. So that's going to create. So this is like the parents are worried about stress about the native. Looks like. And then it looks like they're trying to figure out how they may be able to help. I don't know that they are able to help much. Because like Mars is here in the fifth house of counsel, but it's in Aquarius. It's not super strong. So there might be some, seemingly random advice coming from parents to help, but I'm not sure it's actually helping the native. But they're trying, they're parents. And what else? Oh, I didn't actually put them up, but I did look at the D7, which is the Satabhisha, that's for the children. All the planets are positively placed in the Satabhisha. So that's correlates with that Venus swimming in Jupiterian energy in the fifth house. So the kids are okay. And then the D3 is the Dracana, and that represents siblings for the native. And again, because in the natal chart, the Lord of the third house was Venus, aspected by Jupiter. Again, I was like, it's like all good. And in the D3, just to make sure that's true, all the planets were well placed except for Mars, which represents siblings, and it was in the sixth house of acute issues, but it was exalted. So it's like, so the sibling is worried about the sibling meeting the native, but otherwise is okay. So it wasn't really an issue with the um, siblings of the native, but the native of the siblings, if that makes sense. Yeah. So those are all relationships. Okay, then I looked at education and career, because again, we have that massive Saturn aspecting the fourth house that can represent education. So the top chart here is the Satabhisha, D24, representing education. And then the second chart is the Dashamsha, the D10, representing career. So, D24, let's see. So what's interesting here is that actually uh, Mercury and Jupiter, the two education planets, are not well placed. And Jupiter and Mercury are pretty important subdishas. So it looks like there may be issues with education. Um, what's also interesting is Jupiter is the lugnatia of this chart. So it's the ruling planet, and Jupiter has gone to the eighth house of, again, esoterica research, and it's exalted there. So it looks like, and since it's the lugnatia of the whole education chart, it looks like this person has issues, sort of chronically, I would say, because not only did Jupiter go to the eighth house and negative house, but then you have Mars and Saturn aspecting um, the lugna here. So it could be this person really likes research and education, but they're these kind of, again, physical things like nuts and bolts things, technical things that are, kind of create some drag on education here. And then the other thing, just to, add more, Mars and Saturn are also aspecting the fourth house here of education. Yeah. Um, it looks like, though, the thing, though, is that if we look at the fifth house here, we have Sun and Moon. Sun is exalted in Aries, and then we have Mars aspecting here. Um, and the Sun is the lord of the ninth house. So we have what that does is Sun is exalted with a Swa Mars. So again, leading us back to the ninth house of like teachers and authority, father. This is going to be a really kind of very strong, almost aggressive, I would say, very fiery type of teacher. So again, it corresponds with what we were seeing in the ninth house of the native. Um, the other thing is that Sun, Mars, Moon combination in the fifth house. The Moon represents the emotional mind and the intuitive mind. All this fire. This is somebody who probably has a hard time concentrating, like almost like ADD, ADHD type situation. And that may be good in some ways because this person might be able to like super sharp, but they may not be able to like focus and concentrate. Um, what else here? Anything else? I think overall, though, like any difficulties this person, again, if this was a person, any difficulties this person does have with education because of the Saturn and Mars, they're going to be able to kind of endure it or muscle through it and overcome the difficulties here. And again, this person, again, might be very interested in studying, starting studies in esoterica. So things like Jyotish, Ayurveda, yoga. Then the Dashamsha D10, all the planets are positively placed except Jupiter. It's in the 12th house again. So that might be like a loss of optimism. It's also, let's see, the Jupiter is the lord of the fourth house home, also seventh house spouse, independent business. So again, there can be strains during this Jupiter sub period antra on those things. So home and spouse, which we see in the natal chart as well. What do I have here too? And then again, we have Mars, Sun, Moon. We have Mars aspecting the ninth house, and we have Moon and Sun there. So again, we have this fiery, active boss, teacher, authority. So there's something going on there. Because we've seen it like 3 times already. What else? Fifth house. Oh, Mercury, and the K2, and then Mars is aspecting here, so Mars is going to be exalted here. Mm, I'm not sure. Oh, and then the Lord of the fifth house is this Swa Saturn. Oh, because there's a parivartana. Okay, I was like missing that. I was saying there's a parivartana exchange of houses between Mercury and Saturn. So in the fifth house, you can just imagine A2, Mercury, Mars, and Saturn. The Saturn and Mars are going to bring a lot of strength, but strength in the way of very practical matters like engineering type stuff, again, is what I'm seeing here. In terms of the mindset, there may be like a unusual but very effective way of advising people. on how to restructure their thoughts, especially during chaotic times. So again, that gets into that kind of advisor role that we saw in the native chart, like that Venus swimming in Jupiter, Jupiter carrying the sea in the fifth house. So this looks like in the career, that's part of what this person does is help people restructure their thoughts during chaotic times, which is again kind of the sixth house pravraja yoga, conglomeration of four planets. But the mind is very strong. Yeah, so at least the both actually, because you have Mercury, it's there with K2 and Mars and Saturn, so you do have malefics on it. But that's kind of that restructuring restructuring thought processes. But then you have Moon exalted in the ninth house, so it's a very intuitive process in terms of how to go about, I think, restructuring people's thoughts so they're more productive. So that's the career. Then I went through income and assets because, again, it did look like there were money issues. So the first chart here at the top is the Ekadamsha D11 representing income. And then the second chart is the Chatratamsha D4 representing assets. And, the income looks pretty good here. You do have the sun in a negative house, but again, sun is like a blip on the screen. It's not like a long sub period here. So that doesn't really worry me much. But what else do we have here? So all the planets are well placed except the sun. The thing though is that you have sun with moon, K2, Rahu. So there's protection here, but there's still worries going on. So there's no real issue, but there's a worry about issues. And then Mars and Saturn aspecting Venus. Okay, so again, you have Mars and Saturn going to the fifth house here with Venus, the planet of worldly counseling. So this can be fairly aggressive here. You do also have Mercury there. That's going to protect that fifth house. So it looks like there's pretty good counseling about how to restructure things. Um, and that, again, the fifth house also represents things like romance. So there may be a bit of a clash in terms of maybe income because of the Mars and Saturn here. That worry about uh, like work and stuff like that may affect again and potentially income maybe affecting the choice of whether to again have this rendezvous date night types of thing going on. There is also a parivartana exchange of houses between Mars and Jupiter. So Mars and Jupiter are very strong. So it looks like income is actually really good during Mars Jupiter period. But again, it looks like there's stress here on the spouse. So the spouse may just, despite the circumstances, which are actually pretty good, at least with income. No, we'll get into it. We'll see more with the assets chart, but income's coming in, so that's not really the problem. But it looks like there's still some worry. What's all this worry about then? So then, if we look at the Chatra Tamsha, I think that will give us some insight. So this is assets, and you can see I circled the little 5 in the Lugna here. So this is the same rising sign as the natal chart. So that means that this is important as a subzodiac. And you can see here, now we're getting more, trouble. So Sun, even though it's a blip on the screen, is not well placed, but also Mars and Jupiter are not well placed. And it's the Mahadasha and then the first Antara. The thing though, so that's looking like, maybe not so great. But the thing is, Mars is exalted and Jupiter's exalted. So they're still strong, which is better than nothing. And the other thing is they're like aspecting each other, which I think brings some, twists and turns, you know. And the thing is, Mars and Jupiter also the Chidra grahas. So I think this is the kind of sticking point, the reason why stress is going on because of assets. So, and what are the assets about? Well, Mars and Jupiter, I mentioned them. So Mars and Jupiter together like this, I would think legal issues. Because when you get Mars and Jupiter together, Jupiter is like law and Mars is fighting. And Mars is in the house of legal issues, although it's exalted. So the other thing is Jupiter represents things like kids and education. So what I was seeing here is that Mars exalted in the sixth house, this might be like an extra push, again, pushing in the physical world to create the income to potentially pay for bills related to kids and or education. So it's not necessarily a problem with the kids because I mentioned the D7 Satabhisha was I think all the planets are positively placed, but it's like education and kids bills, I think, related to these things. And it could also be restructuring finances because Jupiter can represent finance and Saturn is aspecting Jupiter. So it's about how do they potentially restructure finances, assets to cover, big bills like education. It could also be like some sort of hospitalization. Because again, whenever you sign, like, at least in the States, when you start school or you go into the hospital, the first thing they do is have you sign a contract saying you're responsible for any fees, for services and stuff. So you're on the hook from the beginning, the day, first step you make into the building. So that's potentially legal stuff. But again, it looks like it's going to work out. Even though there is some restructuring and some stress around that, it still looks like it's going to work out. The other thing is that this Mars, this kind of push for Mars, push for new action and stuff in the sixth house, which is creating stress. And again, we've got this Mars in the sixth house of GI issues, and it's aspecting the 12th house, creating, where it's debilitated, creating, sleep issues. This Mars is aspecting onto Mercury. So the mind, the rational mind, and decision makings and stuff like that. So it looks like there's some aggressive decisions being made that, and maybe even impulsive decisions that are being made to create this like big push, but it doesn't seem like it's sustainable, and it's creating stress. So I think the native is attempting to find ways to create new balance between this physical push, and we'll see other things. Yeah. And then the Saturn is aspecting onto the fourth house of home. It's also aspecting on the seventh house of spouse, partner. So same stuff as in the natal chart. The Jupiter in Cancer exalted in the 12th house. That may actually be a good thing. So that's like kind of a first, not first, but another sign where again, Jupiter and Cancer in the 12th house could be like a spiritual retreat or like a meditation, or like some kind of foreign spiritual idea of how to bring better energy into the home because that Jupiter aspects not only the Saturn aspects the fourth house of home, but Jupiter aspects there. So I think there's some good energy if there is some meditation or spiritual retreat type stuff going on. That's going to bring some better energy to home situation. Yeah. So that's where I think potentially the balance can be of like, it looks like this person, or at least the spouse, is very focused on shifting things and rearranging things, and they're stressed about that, even though there's no real issue. Again, it could be like a long-standing fear about money and security and stuff like that, that's causing stress. But it looks like this person really needs to kind of step back, and rather than trying to muscle their way through the situation, because it's going to be a long-term situation, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You have to find another way to balance, like the physical efforts on in their own power, and kind of drawing inspiration from the spiritual realm or like a spiritual teacher and creating more balance there. That's going to be more sustainable. Okay, so then if we look at health, because I did mention health's an issue. So we have the Tajik Shashtamsha D6 at the top, that's acute illness, then the Tajik Ashtamsha D8, chronic illness in the middle, and the Bhamsha D27, general strength in the bottom here. So the top chart here, Mars and Mercury are not well placed, but the thing is Mercury's in a parivartana with Jupiter, so that's going to help it. And again, we have this Mars in the in the sixth house. So again, acute stress illness, you know, chaos in daily rhythms, inflammation in the gut, and then, Mars aspecting into the 12th house of sleep. So gut and sleep issues again, acutely. And then if we look at the second chart, this is actually fairly giving some optimism here. So in this chart, Venus and Saturn are not well placed. The thing is, Venus is like a blip, and Saturn is also just a sub entra. So the major, like Mahadasha Mars, is well placed, and it's Swa, so that's strong. And then Jupiter is exalted. So I think, again, this isn't necessarily a chronic health issue, but it's just a acute inflammation because somebody's pushing too hard. Is what I'm saying. So, and then anything else here? Venus is exalted. So, I don't know. Venus. I don't think Venus is causing a problem here. It is being aspected by Jupiter, its soul enemy. Soul enemy is a concept we only use in the amshas, so don't use that on the natal chart analysis, or if you're doing that. What else? There is a little bit of rock and roll here because this massive Mars at Swa in the 4th house of, again, nutrition. um, you know, um, this could be, it is aspecting this Jupiter, and Mars is also aspecting Mercury. Mars is the soul enemy of Mercury. Am I right? Yeah, Mars is the soul enemy of Mercury. So there's issues here on, this could be like inflammation of like the peripheral nerves. This could also be a massive push by the partner, and Mars is debilitated. So this could be, again, issues with partner. In terms of nutrition, though, because I kept getting nutrition out of this. So Mars and Aries in the 4th house. So this could be a family. The family line grew up eating a lot of spicy food. And the thing is, it could be like an ethnic type of spicy diet because we have Rahu and Ketu. Rahu's Swa in Aquarius. We only use Rahu in Aquarius, or at least I do, in the Amshas. But we have Rahu and Ketu, both planets representing like foreign or unusual foods. So it could be like a family diet is like this ethnic, traditional ethnic but spicy diet. It could also be potentially like, because Rahu, Ketu, and Mars are all tamasic planets, it could be like a diet where somebody's not really cooking, they're just eating a lot of fast food or processed food. But because Mars is Swa here and Rahu is Swa, I was thinking more kind of the higher octave version of that, which would be, again, family ethnic spicy diet. Like when I see patients for nutrition, like I was just talking to somebody about this. I've had patients that because of different ethnic traditional diets, they've gotten sick. Like I've had Haitian patients, they eat a lot of spicy food and they'll do a lot of home remedies. So I had this one woman who was drinking cups and cups of hot tea with lemon and rosemary, but like 3 cups a day. And it was irritating her stomach as well as her lungs. So she was coughing and she was getting nauseous and vomiting. So we had to slow that down. And then I had another patient from like the Macedonian region who eats like, cloves and cloves of raw garlic most days. And she has a bunch of irritated mucous membranes that we're trying to heal. Well, some people just use way too much salt, like not even in their diet, but like if they do nasal rinsing and they're using salt water all the time, it can irritate the mucous membranes in the nose and cause problems. So yeah, people sometimes don't realize the strength of what seem like common kitchen spices. If you do too much of them, you can cause problems. So that's what I was kind of seeing here was like maybe again, spicy diet that was causing problems, or at least not helping. Again, if stress is creating a strain in the stomach, and then you're eating a bunch of spicy food on top, that can be a perfect storm for pain and inflammation in the gut. And then the D27, again, this is the same lugna as the natal chart, so that's important. And you can see all the planets are well placed here. So that's good news. This is basically showing that despite the current circumstances, the native has the ability to overcome challenges. Most challenges. The other thing is that you do have Mars aspecting into the ninth house where it's Swa, and you have the Venus Jupiter there. So that can be like new initiatives to form a like spiritual community satsang. Also, that would potentially be like a very wise guru who could be helpful, gaining strength from that. And Jupiter is aspecting its own sign in the fifth house of advising. So it looks like one of the things that's going to help this person maintain their strength through challenges is things like socializing, because again you have Venus, Jupiter, Mars in the ninth house, but then you also have Moon, Sun, and Mercury in the 11th house of social, like just secular social circles. So socializing with good people, positive people is going to be helpful. Meditation is going to be helpful. You have Mercury in its own sign. I think I mentioned in some of my talks that when I see Mercury in its own sign, that can often indicate, at least spiritually, people who are interested in things like Buddhism and meditation, Buddhist-like meditation type stuff. So it looks like meditating, finding groups to meditate with. Um, the other thing with Jupiter aspecting into the fifth house not only represents counseling, but things like mantra, tantra, yantra. And Jupiter is the planet representing oration. And you also have this Mercury aspecting in the fifth house, Mercury's speech. So this person could, I think, also benefit from things like chanting mantras or doing something like kirtan, kind of mantras to music. Yeah, but this is good news. So if there is stomach or sleep issues, it looks like they're just temporary. And then this last slide here, this is spirituality and religion. So again, we've been getting glimmerings of, that spirituality is important here. And so let's take a look. So at the top here, we have the Tajik Panchamsha D5. This is innate spirituality. So this is kind of your own sort of organic version of spirituality. And then the Vimshamsha D20 or worship, which is kind of more organized religion type spirituality. So you can see in the D5, this is a pretty strong chart here. The only planet that's not well placed is Sun, which is again just a blip. But you can see here, Mars is exalted in the second house. It's aspecting into the fifth house of good counseling and also initiatives and innovative mindset and again mantra, tantra, yantra. And then you have Jupiter in the seventh house aspecting to its own sign in the Lugna with Venus. That's why, and then when I saw this on top of like the previous chart, um, uh, and then you also have Mercury here in the Kendras as well. This is a Saraswati yoga. So this is like a artistic type combination of planets. It just seems like the person's innate kind of spirituality is when they engage in the arts, they feel better. So I would do more of that. If I was this person. And then Jupiter, Venus. This is going to be a very strong spiritualized, um, what is it? Art. So something like kirtan, chanting mantras to music. So I would do that. Anything else here? Also, writing and journaling could be important. Again, as a kind of a creative art. It's helpful for like just clearing the mind because you have this Saturn in the ninth house aspecting the third house of written communication, um, which, again, could be something like journaling, writing. And anything else? Oh, and again, we have Saturn in the ninth house, and we have Mars aspecting here. So again, we're getting this Mars Saturn combination in the ninth house. So this could be a spiritual teacher that gives guidance or structure. So even if you're not going to like a service at a temple or church or something regularly, even if you occasionally drop in with some sort of spiritual teacher, they can give you kind of new hints or clues or techniques that you can try out. Because sometimes it's like that's part of the whole spiritual education process is that sometimes the techniques you've been using, they kind of feel like they lose their power, and sometimes that just means it's time to learn some new, tricks, some new techniques and stuff like that to keep you moving on your path. And then the Vimshamsha D20, the worship one. So here, this is a little bit more challenged, but again, Saturn and Venus are not well placed. But again, these are short-lived antras, so this didn't concern me too much. But the thing is that this D20 didn't look as strong to me as the D5. So, but it was good in some ways. Like the Lugnatia here and the D20 is Jupiter. Jupiter's gone to the 11th house of, I would see as socializing, but Jupiter's debilitated here. So again, I'm just like, oh, the D20 is, the other thing, what else is going on here? But somebody might go to service, like services or classes or something to socialize so that they're not feeling so alone, instead of just completely, in their own world or bubble, not connected to anybody. It seems like, going to some sort of, classes or services or something on occasion would be helpful just to meet other people. Because sometimes it's like, especially when we're really stressed and strained, it's hard, to either maintain our practice or maintain our faith in our practice and stuff like that. And most people, at least, what I've learned through teaching yoga is that it's a rare individual who can maintain their own practice on their own every day without a lot of people around them. So, yeah, I mean, some people can, and they're brought, they're happy and better off that way, more productive that way, but most people are not in that boat. So again, this person might, benefit a bit from that. The other thing is Mars in the fourth house is aspecting this 11th house, so it's kind of like nicha bhanga. It's going to break that debilitation, or at least ameliorate it to some degree. Um, so again, there might be some usefulness in socializing through groups. And why saying this? Oh, the other thing is Mars is in the fourth house, and Mercury is aspecting into its own sign there. So this could be like new initiatives in terms of creating some new lineage or tradition that's going to shape the mind. Um, you can get that from just interacting with other people, other groups. They can introduce you to other ideas, to maybe give you a lift somehow. Um, The other thing is this Jupiter, even though it's debilitated in the 11th house, it is aspecting into Cancer in the 5th house where it's exalted. So again, that's performances, lectures, that sort of thing. It could be a sense of home. Yeah, so, when you need it, dipping into more of a structured community setting, looks like there would be some benefit there. Oh, also the Jupiter exalted in the 5th house. Again, that's more oration with mantra, tantra, yantra. So that could be chanting mantras or kirtan, that sort of thing. So overall, what I was seeing here, if we're putting this whole package together here with the natal chart and all these amshas, is that there's stress and strain going on affecting the health, like especially the GI and sleep. And even though there's some attempts that may not be have like sticking power, there is endurance here, and that the the problems here are more of the mind than reality. But still, it's an opportunity to look at the deeper thoughts that are causing the stress, and to again potentially find new community or techniques and tools and tricks that will support the person through life, not just this experience. But also, it seems like there's a imbalance between focusing too much on the physical plane, and kind of pushing there in your own power versus like finding a balance between I've done what I can and then I let go and release and surrender to the higher forces of, nature or spirit or whatever you want to call it. And especially tapping into spiritual practice and maybe spiritual teacher community will help bring that balance back so that there's, a more balanced distribution of attention and energy between uh, manifesting things in the 3D material plane and then gathering strength and inspiration and faith through the spiritual practice. Okay, so that's the new moon. So as always, I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate you stopping by, listening to one of my talks, supporting my work in the channel. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic Astrology and Jyotish are in my concepts playlist. They can all be found there. I do individual birth chart readings on Zoom, so if you're interested in that, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more information. I do also have another YouTube channel on natural medicine. It includes other Vedic arts like Ayurveda and yoga, as well as other paradigms of natural medicine like homeopathy and naturopathic medicine. And that channel is called Nature Source Care. So as always, I hope you found this talk interesting, useful, and helpful to you as you navigate the energy cycles of your own life. So until next time, take care. Namaste.